Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the P.A.S. Report podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano, and I'm glad you could join me today. If you're not already a subscriber, make sure to follow and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Also, visit the P.A.S. Report website, pasreport.com, and share this episode with your family and friends and on social media. We have a lot to talk about today because there's so much going on. I constantly say how we're living through bizarre and extraordinary times, and who would have thought that we would see the day when a Kennedy decided that they would throw their support behind a Republican? And yet here we are. And the Democrats, the never-Trumpers, they're going absolutely apoplectic. And it tells you a lot, right? Lifelong Democrat, with a lifelong Democrat vice presidential person on the ticket, comes out and says how corrupt the Democratic Party is. Like, it does get you to think. Now, Kennedy has been exiled from the political party, from the Democratic Party, the party that preaches tolerance, yet it's only tolerance if you toe the line. The second you slightly deviate from the Democratic groupthink mentality, then they're like vipers. Then they're going to seek out and try and destroy you, your reputation, engage in character assassination. Quite frankly, it's pathetic. But it does show you how worried they are. They know that if 1 to 2% of Kennedy's support goes Trump's way, especially in the swing states, that it could make all the difference in this election cycle. That's why they're calling him all sorts of names. They're making up wild accusations that he's having an affair with Tulsi Gabbard. They're trying to malign his character. They want to downplay the endorsement. They proclaim it's meaningless. Meaningless. You have other members of the Kennedy clan all support Vice President Harris. But if it wasn't that impactful, then the Democrats, there's no need to be that outraged. Like, if Robert F. Kennedy was just, some obscure figure in the American political landscape and his support really didn't matter at all, they would simply ignore it. So, given the level of outrage, it shows that this worries them. It shows that this has scared them. It's why the pathetic media, that's nothing more than an extension of the Democrat National Committee, if they weren't worried, they wouldn't have ran with this story where someone Kennedy went to college with 50 years ago accused him of selling drugs at Harvard, and this is now a big story. And I really find it disgraceful how other members of the Kennedy family have attacked Robert F. Kennedy. I mean, RFK was savagely attacked by the Democrat establishment during the primary process. Savagely attacked. You would think that as family members, they would have come to their brother's defense. I mean, there's certain things that should rise above politics. Remember, politics is a sliver of our lives, right? I mean, the government and its policies obviously impact our lives, but politics itself is a sliver of our lives. Our relationships are much more important than that. And you would think that members of the Kennedy family would have defended their brother, saying that this is a free country. Instead, they joined in the attacks. And they should be ashamed of themselves, rather than come out and acknowledge that, okay, we're a family, we differ on political opinions, differ on who we support. They put out a statement about how Robert F. Kennedy betrayed them by announcing his support for Trump. Betrayed them, calling it a sad ending to a sad story. What horrible human beings these are. When you have family members like that, you don't need enemies, that's for sure. And remember, when Democrats talk about a cult, they're projecting. Because they're the ones that operate with this cult mentality that you cannot deviate from any of the narratives that exist. See, I know I disagree with Robert F. Kennedy on 90% of the issues. He is very progressive. I am conservative. But there are core issues that I could agree with him on. And he laid some of those out, right? The idea of censorship, the attacks on freedom of speech. Those are things that I could agree with. And I will sit there and talk to other Democrats. I'll talk to progressives. If I find issues where we could come together and agree on, well, then we could have a conversation and perhaps you could make some changes. Perhaps you could be pragmatic and find solutions to some of the problems that we face. Work on the things you agree with first, then you could tackle the more controversial issues. I don't need someone to agree with me 100% of the time. I recognize that. Pragmatism is dead now. And it's not just that RFK came out and said, okay, I'm supporting Trump, and that's it. RFK gave a speech, and he laid out the corruption of the establishment. He laid out the corruption within the Democratic Party, a party that rigged its primaries. He laid out the corruption of the legacy media that serves as nothing more than an extension of the DNC. And he said it so crisply, so succinctly. Every American should listen to his speech. I encourage you to do that. But what's going on today, it goes far beyond any one person. It's not just about Kamala Harris. It's not just about former President Trump or someone like a Robert F. Kennedy Jr. It's much bigger than that, because the American people are being played. You're being played for fools. And the question is, when are the people going to realize it? When are they going to wake up? Because that's the theme of this episode. Just look at what's happened since the debate between Trump and Biden. The conspiracy to cover up President Biden's cognitive decline was exposed, but the Democrats and their allies, the legacy media, they quickly swept it under the rug. Nobody's even talking about it anymore. They anoint Kamala Harris the nominee without any input from ordinary Democrats. No debate. You must fall in line. You must back her. You must get behind her, or else you're going to be savagely attacked. And again, you're being played. Since President Biden has dropped out of the race, how many days has he actually worked? Like, how many days? How many days has he had any type of real policy briefings? How many days has he sat down with cabinet officials? How many dignitaries has he met with? That's a serious question, because he's been to Delaware numerous times since he announced he's withdrawing from the race. He just spent a week in California. Now he's back at Rehoboth Beach in Delaware for the next 9 days. Biden dropped out of the race on July 21st. How many days has he been at the White House over the last month? Almost month and a half. Who is running this country? The American people have a right to know. But it seems that our overlords think otherwise. They don't care. It's simply another example of how we are being played as the American people. They don't think that they have to answer to us. And yet there's a lot of people that let them get away with it. Then, you had the Democratic National Convention going on for 4 days. Did they talk about policy? No, they didn't talk about policy. Instead, you had multimillionaires and a multi-billionaire lecturing us. Oprah Winfrey complaining about income inequality. Michelle Obama recalling how her parents, quote, were suspicious of folks who took more than they needed, end quote. Basically demonizing success and wealth. Now think about that for a moment. They could have given such powerful speeches that talked about the greatness of America. They could have talked about how they worked hard to overcome the obstacles they faced, how that they persevered and they were able to achieve the American dream, and that the American dream is alive and well. That would have been so powerful had they done that, but instead they pushed grievances and victimhood. Everyone's a victim. Only in America can you be a multi-billionaire and play the victim card. And again, it shows how you are being played as you struggle living paycheck to paycheck, as you're dealing with Bidenomics and the inflation, paying more for everything. You have billionaires lecturing you about how they're the real victims. But it gets worse than that. And what I'm about to tell you should infuriate every single one of you. And I want to talk about that when we get back from this quick break. So everyone, hang tight. We'll be right back. Are you prepared for the unexpected? As a former emergency manager, being prepared is not a choice, it's a necessity, and that's where the Wellness Company comes in. Imagine having the peace of mind that you're equipped to handle any medical crisis, from tick bites to the latest pandemic. The Wellness Company's medical emergency kit is your lifeline, packed with essential medications like ivermectin, emergency antibiotics, antivirals, and more. This kit is your ultimate preparedness solution. The Wellness Company's team of renowned medical professionals, including Dr. Peter McCullough, Dr. James Thorpe, Dr. Harvey Risch, Dr. Drew Pinsky, and more. They are truth-seeking doctors, and they have designed a kit that sets the gold standard for safety and prevention. Don't wait for the next crisis to strike. Visit twc.health/PAS and use promo code PAS for an exclusive 10% discount just for being a listener of this show. Prepare today, rest easy tomorrow. Use code PAS at checkout. Welcome back, everyone. So I'm explaining all the ways the American people are getting played, and understand the entire Kamala Harris campaign is nothing more than a facade. None of it's real. It's all fake. It's all scripted. I went over that time and time again. They are trying to remake her as if the last 4 to 5 years doesn't exist. It never happened. As if Trump is still president and this is 2020. As if she doesn't have a record. As if she's a competent human being. However, if she was so competent, Why is it such a problem that she can't even sit down for an interview? And just think about all this setup where she's supposed to be doing this interview at the end of the month. We still don't know the network. We don't know who's going to be the interviewer. And now they're saying that, well, it's going to be an interview with Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. Interviews in politics, it's routine. Politicians do them every day, especially presidential candidates. It really shouldn't be this complicated, but it is. And the reason it's this complicated is because it's obvious. Her own people have such little confidence in her abilities, and so they have to carefully stage everything. You know, interviews, they're routine. But for her, it's actually a high-stakes event where it may make or break her. And I suspect that in the interview, whenever it happens, maybe it will happen this week, maybe it won't, but I suspect that she'll most likely do fine. She may say a couple of stupid things, but I don't think it's going to break her campaign. But her own people can't even trust her to do a 10, 15, 20, 30-minute interview with a friendly press outlet. Make no mistake about it. It's not like she's going on Fox or Newsmax or Real America's Voice. It's going to be a friendly press outlet. And the person that's conducting the interview is going to be a Kamala Harris supporter that carries weight for the Democratic Party and Kamala Harris, and yet she's still afraid. She's afraid. Her staff's afraid. Amazing. When it comes to the debate, you have the Harris team that demanded that Trump abide by his agreement with Biden, even though Democrats changed the opponent. They swapped the opponent. They still demanded that, nope, President Trump has to agree to the terms that he agreed with Biden, even though the Democrats did not fulfill their end of the bargain by providing Biden on stage. And then Trump said, fine, I'll do the debate. He proposed 2 other debates, one being September 4th or 6th, before early voting starts. And the Harris team rejects it. Says, nope, she's not doing any other debate, especially a debate on Fox. She'll only commit to the ABC debate on September 10th. Now, again, think about this for a sec. She said maybe after that debate they could consider a second debate in October. Now, the only way they would want a second debate in October is if she's down or they feel she's down. Otherwise, they're going to say, take a hike, we're not doing another debate. But that's the thing. Even if it does, a second debate does take place in October, early voting would have been underway for 3 weeks at that point. Now Harris says that, well, you made this deal with Biden, but Trump has to agree to new terms for the debate because the original agreement was actually made with Biden. Think about this for a second. The Harris team demanded that Trump abide by his agreement with Biden. Now they're saying, well, we have to change the terms of the debate because you didn't make any agreements with Vice President Kamala Harris. You cannot make this stuff up. You can't make it up. And she wants mics to remain on. She wants to be able to use notes at the debate. I mean, come on, really? She wants to use notes? How pathetic is that? You know, someone that wants to be the commander-in-chief shouldn't have to have notes during a presidential debate. I'm sorry, but notes should not be allowed in a presidential debate. You either know your stuff or you don't. You either convince the American people or you don't. You shouldn't have every answer laid out on you on sheets of paper, laid out for you on sheets of paper. That's not the way it works. But again, it's because she is not very capable. She's not a capable person because everything is scripted. It's all choreographed, and they continue to play the American people. She steals Trump's idea for no taxes on tips. Now she says she wants to build a border wall. I mean, this is a person that lambasted. You could look up the clips from 2017 till she got to the vice presidency of the United States. She mocked, ridiculed, demanded that no wall get built, saying it's a waste of money, it's ineffective, it doesn't matter, it doesn't work, that it's racist. Now she wants a border wall. Imagine that. She's now going to get tough on illegal immigration. But it actually gets worse than that. Now, this isn't just about Kamala Harris. This is the officials and the mindset of the officials that we have in office, whether it's the politicians that we elect, whether it's appointed officials, it doesn't matter. I'm not sure how many of you know about this, but Oregon has just announced a new program for first-time homebuyers. First-time homebuyers are encouraged to apply for a taxpayer-funded $30,000 grant for down payment assistance. So what's the catch? Well, here's the kicker. According to the grant, only non-U.S. citizens can apply. Think about that for a second. This grant program is, quote, only for people who are not American citizens, end quote. How many of you listening to this podcast right now could actually use an extra $30,000? How far would that go? How much would that help you in your own personal lives? Now, I'm not advocating that American citizens get $30,000. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just trying to make a point that they're willing to hand out $30,000 for down payment assistance to illegal immigrants. And yet you, the American people, the people that they swore to serve, you don't matter. Your problems don't matter. Think about the number of people and families who are struggling in Oregon. Think about the number of people living paycheck to paycheck, trying to make ends meet and still coming up short. Think about the number of veterans who served this country, who were willing to pay the ultimate sacrifice, some coming back with life-altering injuries. Think about the number of homeless Americans living on the streets in the cities like Portland. But they don't matter. The American people don't matter. And it's not just Oregon. We're witnessing programs like this pop up in blue states across the country. You go to Massachusetts, illegal immigrants can qualify for free college tuition for community college. Yet, if you're a New York State resident and you want to go to school in Massachusetts, you're going to pay the out-of-state tuition rate, which is going to be 2 to 3 times higher depending on the college you want to go to. Again, think about the needs of the people in the state of Massachusetts. Think about how much money a program like that costs, and then what about the needs of the people? Why don't they matter? I mean, for God's sakes, you have a Boston suburb where parents were just notified that some schools are going to have to axe busing because they lack funding. They don't have the resources or the capabilities, right? So you're a parent, you send your kids to public school, you pay your taxes, you follow the rules, follow the laws. And now the school's telling you, well, we can't afford to bus your child to school, even though you're paying your property taxes, you're paying your sales taxes, you're paying your state income tax, right? They can't afford to bus your child to school. And you have to scramble. You have to scramble. Despite you doing all the right things, you're doing everything you're supposed to do. Well, now you have to figure out a way to get your children to the school. However, students at migrant shelters will still get school busing from the shelter to the school. 2 school buses being used to pick up migrant students at a shelter to bring them to school. You and your children don't matter. You and your children are not important. Shut up, you peasants. Figure it out yourselves. And that's the message, right? That's the message. It's insulting. It's infuriating. It's frustrating because you see how the American people are being played. Yet despite all this, how many people would still vote exactly the same way for the same politicians that have completely and thoroughly disrespected them? These officials are supposed to be serving we the people. They're supposed to be serving you. Instead, they want to prioritize those illegally in the country. And I could go on and on. Something has changed in our culture, and it's like so many Americans suffer something similar to like the battered wife syndrome, right? Government officials continue to disrespect you, beat you, spit in your eye, and yet so many will just, oh, we're told to vote this way, we got to vote this way. Oh, abortion. Oh, he's mean, he's orange. I mean, it really is a mockery of the entire system. Many of these people that subscribe to the left, they claim that they're informed voters, that they've done the research. They're not informed. I mean, just think about it. Like, you look. What did any policies get brought up at the Democrat National Convention? No. I mean, the one policy area that Kamala Harris has announced, well, she announced 2. She's going to be tough on the border. That's a joke, obviously, with the whole borders are thing. I don't need to go down that road. But the only policy she really announced was economic policy. And that should terrify every American. I mean, her natural inclination is to go to the left. You would think that people would be horrified. Instead, many of them simply shake their heads. They nod in agreement, give the approval like the lemmings they are. And we have to wonder, like, what is the intention behind this, right? I mean, with the whole putting illegal immigrants first and providing them $30,000 down payment assistance, giving them free college education, taking busing away from American students, providing them for these shelters. What is the intent behind this? We have to ask ourselves that, and there's no good answer, but it's astonishing, and it shows how little regard officials have for you, the people. But even worse, it shows how little regard many Americans have for themselves. Like, it's so insulting that things like this would be done. And yet, here we are. And I want to talk about that when we get back from this quick break. So everyone, hang tight. We're going to be right back. Welcome back, everyone. So we're talking about how the mindset of the American people changed, how there's so many Americans that despite the politicians spitting in their face, despite the politicians doing what's not in the people's best interest and what's in other people's best interest, that people will still support those same politicians. And when we look at the policies, as I stated, the only policy that Kamala Harris has announced was economic policy. And just 2 decades ago, the mere suggestion of a presidential candidate, a major presidential candidate, embracing radical socialist policies would have been political suicide. That person would have never have been taken seriously. If they announced this in a head-to-head race, their poll numbers would have collapsed. They would have lost by 49 out of 50 states. They would have been destroyed. You fast forward to today, and Vice President Harris, she's pushing an agenda straight out of the socialist playbook. And not only has a campaign survived, but she hasn't really faced too much pushback. You know, there were some behind the scenes saying that will never happen, and it probably won't. But the fact that she even proposed these things and she didn't suffer any real blowback is amazing, because it isn't just a seismic shift in the Democratic Party. We could sit there all day long and say, oh, the Democratic Party has moved so far left that they're out of touch with the ordinary American people. We could say that, but I hate to break it to you, you're lying to yourself, because this isn't just a shift in the Democratic Party. It's a shift in the values that once defined the United States, where a growing number of Americans support socialist policies, where a growing number of Americans have this sense of entitlement, where a growing number of Americans believe that government is the solution to every problem that we face, that government must provide us what our very basic needs, that all our basic needs. See, Americans should be horrified at the prospect of socialism because it endangers the very freedoms and prosperity that have made us the most exceptional nation in the world. But that's the problem, right? Most Americans, they went through a failed education system that never really taught them about the concepts of liberty, never taught them about the concept of self-government, self-reliance, personal responsibility, free enterprise, and capitalism, and we are where we are. You have a Pew survey that revealed that 44% of individuals between the ages of 18 to 29 have a positive view of socialism. Only 40% hold a positive view of capitalism. And what should frighten you is that even 23% of Republicans, or those that actually lean Republican, have a favorable view of socialism. See, it's terrifying when you look at the numbers. I was looking at a YouGov survey, and I don't know how accurate this survey is, but I mean, you know, YouGov has put surveys out before. Many of them seem to be in line. I don't think there's anyone that has called them out. And you look at the YouGov survey regarding Kamala Harris's economic policies, and what do you see? Well, you see 64% of those surveyed approve of government price controls. Price controls on everything like food and grocery and rent. That's terrifying. Why do so many people sit there and support the nanny state, support these socialist ideals, the $25,000 down payment on a home, the canceling of student loan debt? Why? What happened? Now, the shift isn't by accident. It's the result of a deliberate effort by many within the education system and the far left, because they've hijacked the education system. They've been denigrating capitalism for decades. And at the same time they denigrate capitalism, they try and romanticize socialism. So you have so many Americans ignorant to the historical realities of socialism and communism. These are systems that have consistently led to widespread misery, despair, and death. And I've seen it firsthand, right? I mean, I write for Campus Forum. I'm a college professor. So I do a lot of research, and you have tons of professors that will sit there, and they're going to equate capitalism with racism, white supremacy. They'll equate it with colonialism and slavery. But that's not capitalism. And don't mistake the corporate parachutes and crony capitalism with capitalism, because it's not. But yet students are being forced to believe this crap. And as they get older, they push this idea, they push these policies when they get into their own positions. As a matter of fact, when we look at capitalism and socialism, most people couldn't even define these economic systems. They wouldn't be able to define it. They don't know. They have no idea that capitalism has led hundreds of millions, billions of people into prosperity. And it amazes me because we look at our educational institutions, particularly the higher education level, and rather than celebrate icons like Adam Smith or Milton Friedman, Frederick Hayek, Thomas Sowell, rather than celebrate icons like that, Instead, they celebrate Marxist tyrants. I mean, you could go to University of California, you could go to New York University, NYU, Yale, so many other universities that literally have Marxist working groups on their campuses that's open to students and faculty, researchers. It's amazing. Okay, if you're visiting the University of California, San Diego, you could grab a bite to eat at the Che Cafe. It's named after the Marxist Argentinian dictator and mass murderer Che Guevara. So you could stop and eat at Che Cafe. Or you could go visit the Mao Zedong bust at Washburn University. You know, these examples are not isolated incidents. It's part of a broader trend that we're seeing throughout our society where socialist ideals are celebrated over capitalist principles. And what's this all about? Well, it's about reinforcing this idea of lower standards. It's about reinforcing mediocrity, the sense of entitlement that we've seen infect our society. And it's all through the mindset of equity, right? Through an agenda that's rooted in socialist ideas. And you have so many Americans that are completely ignorant to the fact that the very same price controls Vice President Harris is promoting were already implemented in our past, right? I mean, you don't have to look far. Just go back to the Soviet Union, go back to Mao's Communist China, go back to Pol Pot's Cambodia, Fidel Castro's Cuba, Kim Jong-un's North Korea. I mean, we don't have to look far. We're seeing it in present day. We see it in Venezuela, where under the Maduro regime, the Chavez-Maduro regime, Venezuela went from the wealthiest nation in South America to one of the poorest nations in the entire world. Now, the Democrats are trying to repackage socialism under the guise of, quote-unquote, a care economy. But the dangers of these policies remain unchanged, and they threaten the principles that have defined America. And yet you still have Americans that will support these policies. And that's why it's incumbent on us to speak to other people, not just those that agree with us and agree with our ideological beliefs, but to speak to those. I'm not talking about like the rabid progressives. You're never going to be able to change their mind. Speak to open-minded people. Inform them. Speak to them about the horrors of socialism. Speak to them about how we're losing our country. Speak to them about how we need to reclaim our country, that capitalism has lifted millions of people out of poverty while socialism has led to poverty. It's led to famine and death. We have to begin to turn the tide. And I'm very concerned about this election because this election will show, is it us that are out of touch? Have we shifted that much as a country that it's moved so far left as opposed to being center right? Is it really us that's out of touch, or are we spot on? And it's just so many people have lost their way. They buried their heads in the sand and they just actively disengage from the political process. And I think it's going to be a good indication this election day to see where the country is headed. I don't care about anyone's personal feelings about the candidates. I'm looking at the future of this country, the direction the country is going in. I'm looking at the policies. And it's going to be really interesting to see whether or not we return to the principles that led to American success, or whether we're going to make a sharp left turn to principles that have proven to be a thorough and utter failure throughout the course of human history. Ultimately, that's what we're going to be finding out. Now, I want to thank you for joining me. If you found this podcast episode informative, please leave the P.A.S. report a 5-star rating and take 30 seconds to write a good review on any podcast platform that allows it, and share this episode with your friends and your family. It's important, okay? There's not much time left. The next 65 or so days is going to go really quickly, and voting is going to be beginning in about 2 weeks. So there is a lot at stake, and we have to stay engaged. We have to stay informed. I want to thank you for joining me, and I'll be back next week with another great episode of the P.A.S. Report podcast.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at pasreport.com and follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at P.A.S. Report.